Into another live edition of the Patriots Beat podcast. I'm Ryan Spagnoli of CLNS Media. Joined with me, as always, my good friend Alex Barth of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Alex, how are we doing? We feeling a little bit better than we were Sunday, or kind of the same here?
A little bit of a whirlwind here. Apologize for being late. We got those roster moves literally as we were set to come on air, so we wanted to make sure we caught up. Pretty much. I know we'll recap the game here. Pretty much looking ahead to week 2 at this point, but yeah, feeling watching the game back, feeling a little. I don't want to say better. Feeling like I have more context. I think that's important.
Right. I mean, I think let's just start with the moves first, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think a pretty major move in terms of considering the circumstances, right? Montgomery battled that injury, the ankle injury after the final preseason game, traveled with the team, obviously played, scored a touchdown, the lone touchdown in Sunday's game. You thought maybe, hey, this, he's over this. This is their third down back. Didn't see him a lot. Um, Maybe not as much as you'd expect, your pass catching.
So I'll tell you this, he played more than you think he did. He played 21 snaps, which is
Really?
one less than Damien Harris, 7 more than Ramondre Stevenson. He also played 7 snaps on special teams. He was the kick returner. He played a good amount, which is why this is surprising.
Sneaky 21 snaps.
Yeah, well, yeah, it maybe didn't feel like as many, but and that's I have the percentage here in front of me. If you give me 1 second, 37%. So more than a third of the time he was on the field. Harris was at 39. Stevenson was at 25. He played a regular role in the running back rotation. And it didn't,
right.
It wasn't one of those things where I never saw him limp off the field or anything like that. Like there was no obvious injury moment.
No, and that was the strange thing, right? As to why why he's going on IR now, and like you said, Lil Jordan Humphrey coming up. Now you get a 2-man backfield right now, right? I mean, you expect JJ Taylor's probably going to be elevated, right? Guys like that will just kind of soften the blow a little bit, but an interesting move to start. And not interesting, I guess it's common, but an unfortunate move for them, because I thought that was a guy that had a good preseason, somebody you were excited about, obviously scored a touchdown, and you did see flashes of Ramondre's ability to catch the ball, but now he's your pass catching back, or they're just going to kind of mix it in with both these guys.
I think that they're going to go to something we saw in the preseason where Stevenson and Harris are both going to catch passes and they're just going to alternate drives. And we saw a little bit of it in that game. That's the most I've ever seen Damien Harris involved in the passing game. And it's not just like throwing the ball to him, right? That includes pass pro and things like that. I think that's going to be the new model here. Is it's just going to be those two guys back and forth, and maybe JJ Taylor spells them on occasion when needed.
Right. So I guess that's the move we see this week heading into week 2. Montgomery's now out for 6 weeks, right? The minimum now is 6 weeks. He can.
No, it's 4 weeks now to return. So he could, in theory, start practicing. I think next week, right? Because it's 3 weeks to.
They changed it from.
It's 4 weeks to start practicing. So he's going to be out through at least week 5.
Right. So I mean, maybe it's a lingering thing. It's early on in the year, obviously an important piece of their offense. Go get healthy. We think they can kind of soften the blow a little bit with these two guys anyway. So I guess that's it for the moves this week. As of right now, obviously we can recap a little bit more.
Well, there's also, I would say also, Lil Jordan Humphrey getting promoted, I think stands out. The Marcus Cannon being brought back, we knew that. I think we'd already talked about that.
We did.
But Lil Jordan Humphrey getting elevated instead of Taylor, that tells me they will roll for him. It may be on special teams, but they needed a running back. They went with Humphrey instead. That's notable.
As well as, which we'll get into at some point in the show, you bring up another wide receiver. Is that, bad news for Kendrick Bourne, somebody that we should see on the field? I think we can get into that later in the show, but that's a little head scratching too, right? You said no Taylor. Is Pierre Strong going to be active? Is he kind of that third back now? Is he going to get leaped into a role kind of similar to Ramondre Stevenson did last year? That could be the case. And what they're going to go with, and Humphrey, like you said, who has special teams experience, somebody that thrived in the preseason, maybe takes over that Montgomery role we saw on Sunday in terms of special teams.
Yeah. I think like I said before, I think you look at it, special teams is probably where this makes sense. Based on the reports we're getting today about Kendrick Bourne, which are basically that He's benched now because he missed a team meeting about a month ago, which is a bit much. I'm not saying that's justified, but that sounds like why he's benched. This to me feels like more of a special teams move than anything else.
Right. So let's get into the game because I think there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, we had talked on the post game show briefly. We kind of went in and out, both of us. I guess I'll pass it over to you first. Diving into the film, kind of digesting everything. Anything that you saw on Sunday maybe caught your eye or maybe made you feel a little bit more optimistic about them before we kind of pound them and gets the negative? Because I texted you yesterday and I was disgusted. I was like, this team's. We'll get into it, but your initial thoughts.
Yeah, so I think the silver lining is there's a couple on the scripted drives, right? The first drive of each half, they average 6.3 yards a play. That's pretty good. If you're averaging 6.3 yards a play, you're cooking. The non-scripted drives, they average 2.9 yards a play. You're averaging 2.9 yards a play. You're just not staying on the field. So, yeah, the first drive ended in a turnover. That's unfortunate. Maybe it should have been a hold. Probably should have been a hold. Still would like to see Devontae Parker maybe fight for that ball a bit more. But that, when they were moving the ball, they did move the ball well for a period. Now, why didn't that carry over? Could be a number of things. I just think the communication was better on those drives up front. Some of that could be generally your scripted plays are the plays you feel you're the most comfortable with. So guys kind of know their role a little more. I think the other thing is they ran the ball well on both of those drives. They ran the ball well beyond that. I mean, they were averaging, they finished with 3.5 yards per carry, but it was over 5 at one point in the third quarter. Like they just kind of stopped, they struggled to run the ball late. They never went to play action off of that, though. They only ran 2 play action plays in the whole game, and they were 2 of their better offensive plays. But when you're beating a team running the ball, you need to turn that into play action. I mean, that's always been a staple of the Patriots offense, and they just never did that. So I know we're kind of, I'm sorry, we're trying to do the positives here, so we can get back into that later. The other thing the defense, I know Tua wasn't great. It wasn't a perfect defensive performance. The 4th and 7 obviously is inexcusable, but the defense allowed 13 points. If the defense was their biggest issue in that game, if the way the defense played was their biggest issue in that game, I think we'd feel really good about the way this team looks right now. The pass rush was there. I thought Jonathan Jones looked really good on the boundary. Now, it was against Tyreek Hill, a guy's covered before, so it'll be interesting to see going into next week how they use him, but I thought he looked good. Kyle Duggar looked incredible. So there is still, I think, things to be optimistic about on the defensive side of the ball. The offense feels like more of a work in progress. What I would say, and this can kind of lead into some of the negative takeaways here, I'm not ready to say the offense isn't talented. I see some people saying, oh, they have no talent. That's not it.
This is arguably the best skill group they've had since 2018.
I would agree with that. Don't get me wrong. They don't have enough talent to the point where you can bench Kendrick Bourne. They don't. He needs to play.
Especially when your offense lacks juice.
Right. He's their most dynamic playmaker with the ball in his hands, getting open down the field, all of that. But their shortcoming wasn't talent. It was, Bill Belichick always, we hear him talk about this a lot, and he talked about it last week, that he believes the first 6 games, the first month to 6 games of the season are essentially preseason games, right? An extension of the preseason, what we've always heard. That game was the embodiment of that statement and that belief. The offense was incredibly vanilla in terms of what they were calling, what they were trying to do.
I think too, in terms of this game, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I want your thoughts on it because you're getting into it. I didn't think the play calling, was the number one thing that stood out in terms of the issue offensively, right?
It wasn't. It was almost like, think about play calling.
Do you know what I'm saying though?
Yeah. So think about play calling like you're ordering off a menu, right? I don't think that they necessarily ordered the wrong thing off the menu. I just think there was nothing good on the menu, if that makes sense, right? Maybe they and you can't say, oh, well, they have good plays, but they didn't call them. The ratio of the plays they ran to, you're going to call most of what's in your playbook in any given game. You're going to call a significant portion of it. To hide an entire portion of your playbook in a regular season game, if that's what they did, is just as bad as not having that element in your playbook, right? That's preseason football is what that is. So I don't even know that we can sit here and say the offense isn't talented enough, because they never really got a chance to display whether or not they're talented enough. It was all just so vanilla in terms of the patterns they were running, some of the run calls they had, and then they couldn't even execute up front to block it. Those were the issues. It's not a talent thing. It doesn't feel like a talent thing. They've just got to, I see somebody in the comments, it's a boring team to watch. Yeah, it's a boring offense. It's a vanilla offense. That was a Madden playbook. You hope they kind of take it to the next step and soon, and they don't wait 6 weeks. They can do more in terms of play calling. They have some very interesting players. Now, Ty Montgomery was one of those players. I think losing him, you lose a potential
dynamic piece.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you. Potential dynamic. But Kendrick Bourne's a very fascinating player. You can do a lot of interesting things with him. Jonnu Smith is a guy who can, attack the defense in multiple ways.
I haven't seen him play as well. I thought he limited, what do you have, 3 catches? He had a couple targets.
Yeah, he got open a couple times, but they didn't throw him the ball.
Yeah, that was more there than you saw last year, which I thought was another positive. You saw a lot more 2 tight end sets. You saw a lot more of him getting involved. I think he was involved more than Hunter Henry was. Maybe they went to Henry a little bit more. He was maybe more involved in the game plan. But as for Jonnu Smith, we hadn't seen that since it really ever here. I thought he looked, don't look at the box score. Look at what he did in terms of blocking and getting open. They were trying to scheme him up and get the ball in his hands, which I think is a positive to see, because that was something we did not see last year.
Right, but they didn't do enough of it. That's kind of the point. Is this team needs to be about scheme touches.
The first drive, what you saw in the first drive.
Whether it's Jonnu, whether it's Aguilar, whether it's Bourne, whether it's Tyquan Thornton when he comes back, this is a scheme touch offense. And that, honestly, when you look at Josh McDaniels leaving, Josh McDaniels always struggled with scheme touch guys. He struggled with it in the first game in Vegas. They tried some scheme touch stuff that was a disaster. So McDaniels left, and they bring in a guy like Ty Montgomery. They bring in a guy like Tyquan Thornton. They pump up Jonnu Smith, and you think, okay, here we go. They're going to really start running with some of the scheme touch stuff now, like they should have been doing the last couple of years. And it just, I don't want to say we didn't see it. There were 2 or 3, maybe 4 instances we saw it. I'd have to go back and count on the actual tape. I just remember thinking it a couple times, but there needs to be more of that. I think there needs to be more of that.
And I'm curious too, to kind of get into the quarterback. I think there's way too much. This, I guess, is a positive. I don't know. You call me homer, bias, whatever. There's way too much hate, and I know people react on the post game show. I'm sure you saw some of it too, Alex. With, why are you guys talking about Tua? You got the same Tua. You get somebody who's worse than Mac Jones. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit, right? Everybody talked about him last year being in the best situation for a rookie quarterback. That's why he succeeded. That's why he did so well. Fine. You want to make that point. I agree with it to a point. However, if you look around the league now, he might be in the worst situation for a second-year quarterback and an all-important second year, right? I mean, maybe Justin Fields may be a little bit worse considering the playmakers and the line around him. I think Jones' skill group's better, but there's an argument to be made. He's in the worst situation. That guy got hit all day, played through an injury. I know he lacked some of that, I guess, a little more oomph on his ball, but I think a lot of that had to do with the injury. Like, cut this kid some slack. He's going through a lot right now, and I know people, it's the NFL. He's been here. There's a lot of moving pieces. I mean, and from the start of this spring, you can't tell me you're surprised this is how he played week 1, right? Like, am I wrong here?
He's in a bad spot. Yeah, no, it's not. Look, it wasn't the best game Max ever played. It certainly wasn't. But a lot of the circumstance, I mean, some of it is things we talked about with him getting sped up, and that the blindside blitz, right? The strip sack. That's a play where, like, first of all, like, the Dolphins did play that well, where it was Howard, right? The safety that comes up really late. There's 7 seconds on the play clock. He starts his approach. He's either going to be right there at the snap, or they're not going to have enough time to change the play. Like, that's a good play. But what needs to happen on the offensive side of the ball, somebody needs to see that, whether that's – there's really 4 guys. Between 4 guys, one of them should see that. Between Mac, Trent Brown, Strange wasn't in the game at that point. It was Ferentz or whoever the running back in the game was at that point. Or no, it was Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's there in the slot. Running backs on the other side. One of those 4 guys needs to see that. And then what you do from that, even if there's not enough time to change the play, like, ideally you call out a hot audible for the block and somebody picks him up. Like Trent Brown just misses the block there. He doubles to the inside instead. But even if you can't get there, and again, there's 7 seconds on the play clock, you can't step back and rewrite the whole thing. Somebody's just got to yell. I don't know what their call is, but something like hot left or blitz left or free left, something to let somebody's got to yell that either right before the snap or even after the snap when they see him coming. Somebody's got to yell that so Mac knows he has somebody coming on the backside, and then Mac can either roll to his right or throw the ball away or get the ball out quick or something. Mac doesn't know that blitz is coming, and that's why he gets hit the way he does. So that was a failure on multiple levels. But to go back to the point we were making, right? I timed it out. It was 1.8, 1.9 seconds from the snap to the quarterback. That's absurd. That's too fast. You only get there that fast if you're untouched. But when
you saw him coming,
when you're a quarterback,
even on the
you
TV
get
copy,
hit, right? When you're a quarterback and you get hit in under 2 seconds, you all of a sudden get real nervous in that pocket, right? And the plays you thought you had 3 seconds on, you might act like you have 2. The plays you thought you had 2 seconds on, you might act like you had 1.5. And you could tell Mac was a little jittery from that point. So I'm not worried about Mac Jones long-term yet. Again, wasn't the best game he played, but I don't put a lot of that on him.
I mean, 21 of 30, considering the circumstances, like whenever you value completion percentage or not, the pick 2, I question, what the attacking their best player on the outside there. And I know Devontae Parker's a 50-50 guy. That's, he threw it to a spot. You got to hope that, like you said, Parker's got to fight for that ball a little bit more. I think maybe mid-season, that's a flag, right? You can play that game all you want, but the only issue I had there was, why to Parker in that spot. Like I said, I know you want to trust one of your best guys on the outside, but attack their best player,
At a certain point, you have to throw him a 50-50. I mean, he's here to catch 50-50. So there's a couple things on that. I think you need to throw him 50-50 balls. I don't care that it's on a good corner. He's a good receiver, right? He could, and I know he got held. I think he could have made more of a play to go up and fight for that ball. It looked a little bit like Nelson,
or at least
playoff game in Buffalo.
I don't want to say fake it or but at least initiate contact a little more to get yourself a flag, right? Because there was a lot of grabbing.
He ran through it. He turn the head and come back to it. The other thing I'd say, in regards to that play, I wonder if that was a case of we gave up a top 100 pick to get this guy. He's supposed to be a premier receiver. It's early in the game against his former team. I wonder if they told Mac throw that, if that was a one read play, because Jonnu Smith's open there. And a quarterback like Mac, when he doesn't go through his reads, like that's uncharacteristic for him. So I don't know why he would have locked in on that play other than maybe getting instruction from somebody else.
Right. Yeah, no, I know. And like I said, I kind of wrapped it like that's a good defense. They always do. They got a good front. We talked about it last week. Like, if you're having these issues versus, the Lions or, some of these bottom tier teams, like then it's an issue. But that's a good team. Like I don't want to, as bad as it was on Sunday at times, like you got to give the Dolphins some sort of credit defensively. They got playmakers. They've always had a good front.
They did play well.
Secondary. What?
No, they did play. The Dolphins defense played well in that game. Like I said, like on the strip sack, that's just a really good play by that safety to time out that movement pre-snap. At a certain point, you do tip your hat on some of it.
You have to, and I do want to get into, a little bit as to the Bourne situation. I don't know if you want to talk anything else along the game, or we can kind of jump all over the place. I don't really care. There's obviously a ton to cover from the last time we talked. I guess I'll leave it up to you, but I think it's an interesting situation going on, right? I mean, what's the problem here? I don't understand. Does it take a rocket scientist to figure out that your offense lacks juice and a train mover, right? I think they have a good enough skill group to make things work, but it almost seems like everything has to be so perfect for it to go well. I think Bourne's a guy who saw last year, obviously built a rapport with Mac Jones, somebody who is really good after the catch, somebody you can scheme up, somebody you can play all over the formation. And this is going back now months of like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, and based on all the reports out there today, he was late for a meeting about a month ago, and Matt Patricia didn't like that, and they're still punishing for him. There's another report too that they thought he was the fourth wide receiver out of camp. Now there may be some semantics going on there because they may be factoring in like, hey, he's our fourth best guy because we're gonna add, we're gonna impact his value the fact he missed the meeting, and that drops him on our chart, and now he's the fourth best receiver. So, but the crazy, like, that's what's scary to me. If he's benched for disciplinary things, even though Bill said it wasn't, if he's benched for disciplinary reasons, that's not like he shouldn't have been benched. He should be playing. He's their best receiver, but
It's not the time and place either. That's my
but like
issue.
at least in that case, it's like, all right, you got it over with, right? At least if they bench it for disciplinary reasons, it tells us they still think he's a good player. What scares me is if they really think he's the fourth best receiver for whatever reason, if they really have him as the fourth receiver on the depth chart, that's alarming for a number of reasons. One, he's not. He's just not. He's there. I don't want to say he's the most talented because I think the beauty of, and I'll
He's
get into
probably
this
the
in a
most
second,
versatile.
the
He's probably the
beauty
most
of their
versatile.
group, right, is they're all good at different things, but he is the most versatile. He is the most explosive. The other thing is, even if they think he is fourth, which again, I wouldn't agree with, but even if they think he is fourth, I think the beauty of this receiver group, people look at it and say they don't have a real number one. There is a way to use that as a strength. It's Ewing theory. They don't have a real number one, but the gap between 1 and 4 is very minimal. And all 4 guys give you different things. So you can really throw a lot of different looks at a defense by playing with different matchups and different concepts within those matchups, right? The same route combination, if you want to like put 2 routes together, right? Whatever combination, pick one in your head. That combination with Devontae Parker and Nelson Aguilar has to be defended very differently than the same combination from the same spot on the field with Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers, right? But the only way that's going to work is if all 4 play. They should really be rotating all 4 guys almost equally. So if they think Bourne is the fourth wide receiver, fine. I don't agree, but if they think that, but the fourth wide receiver in this offense, and by the way, even if they think, I don't know, Aguilar's the fourth, the gap in usage between the first and the fourth receiver should not be, it was actually 99%. I believe that Parker played all 100 snaps, I think. If not, he played, Parker played all 100 snaps.
And we're not asking Bourne
And,
to play. I didn't
right,
think
and
he
Bourne
played
only
100
4,
last year.
right, and Bourne only played 4% of the snaps. The gap between those two should not be 96. So hopefully, look, the meeting thing's stupid, and it might have cost them a game. I don't think that it did cost them a game. It might have cost them a game, but if Bourne comes out and has like a 50, 60% usage rate this week, fine, whatever. It was annoying. We're over it. This can't become a trend, though. It can't become
But
a
I
trend.
think that's the problem here because you saw Tommy Curran's report, right? That, and I think he's right in the fact that Belichick wants to give him all the power in the world to make those personnel decisions and have him run the offense as much as he can and at least be hands off until, holy shit, excuse me, but this is getting really out of hand. I need to step in, right? So he's going to give Matt Patricia all the power in the world to do this. Is this Patricia now? Like, again, abusing his power in a sense. And like you said, I don't, we're not down there. We're not in the building. We're not in the locker room. So God only knows, but just from following the team and being around him, both virtually and in person, like he's a high energy guy, somebody that all his teammates love, a guy the fans love, somebody that, like I said, brings juice, a game day type of player, plays with a ton of energy. Those are guys you want on the field. And I'm not asking for 100% of the snaps. I don't think that's his usage rate, but I'd be interested to see where he was last year. If it's probably in the 65, 70 range, like at the lowest, that's fine, man. I mean, like this is a
So
versatile guy, somebody that can help you.
I'll pull it up. His usage rate from last year is a little weird because there were a couple games at the beginning of the year where he was active and he didn't play a ton. And then there was that game at the end of the year where he had COVID, but he didn't play. I'm just trying to find it. His overall usage rate last year was 52%, but I want to find it by game. If you'll just allow me to stall here for a second, because I think this is a good point. Here it is. Okay. So Bourne didn't really he didn't play a ton the first 2 weeks. Played about 30 snaps, was targeted 3 times in each of those games. And look, he even admitted like it was a bit of a feeling out process for him learning the offense. He wasn't ready, and that's okay. He wasn't ready. The stat I keep going back to with Kendrick Bourne, and I've said it before on the show, we're going to add playtime to it. From week 3 to week 12, it's a 10-game stretch. Kendrick Bourne's on a 17-game pace, like a full season pace, for what he was for 10 weeks last year, 66 catches, 1,013 yards, 18 yards per catch. That's a borderline number 1 receiver. During that span, his usage rate was, it's not going to give me the aggregate. Just going game by game here.
If you don't get Devontae Parker, right, and I think their receiver room
is just hang on real quick here.
Go ahead, sorry.
Bourne's usage rate during those games, 76 is all percent. 76, 61, 50, 46, 54, 30, but I think that was a game that was like a blowout and they sat a bunch of people. The 30 game was, that was the Chargers game. They ran the ball a ton in that game. But then 53, 43, 45, 55. And then he gets COVID before the Bills game, and he had a couple decent games after that, and his usage was still up in the high 50s, low 60s. He should probably be in the mid 60s this year. Like, that's to me where he should be. And you see, when you give him about 60% snaps, the numbers he can put up are borderline number 1.
And like I said, if you don't get Devontae Parker, and I think their receivers are pretty unique and they can all do different things and they're all kind of have a role. Like, you're going into the offseason in this season with Kendrick Bourne's probably your number 1, right? I know Myers will be the most targeted, but I think he's limited, right? He's not a yak guy. He's a chain mover, somebody that's really good over the middle of the field. I think where Bourne comes into play is you can line him up all over. And you saw it. You come in, that was their biggest play of the day, 41 yards. And it's like this. Those two have a rapport. And he's right off the field after. Didn't get targeted. What did he play? 4 snaps. I don't know if he played 2 after that, and we never saw him again. But you couldn't move the ball aside from the first drive. That one play, 3rd down. It felt like we talked about it last week. Don't get behind the chains. They were like that all day. It's just a slop fest. Like I said, every time they go down there, and they repeatedly wouldn't put him in. So put the ego aside, Matt, and get your good players on the field. Play the guys that should play. I'm not a coach, but I think anybody that watches the Patriots, follows a team, covers a team, he's one of your better players and somebody that can bring some juice to that offense. So let's get going on that.
I think the other thing to remember too is then you're playing other guys out of position. Like the play Aguilar ran, the last offensive play, I think it was a dig with the fumble. That's Kendrick Bourne's route. Like last year, that throw, well, sometimes it's Jacoby Myers, but it was Myers or Bourne. Aguilar's not a guy that's used to having the ball in his hands in the middle of the field. Like, that's just not how he plays. That Bourne in that spot is better equipped to handle that situation. So there's a trickle-down effect as well. It makes the other, Bourne not being on the field makes and the same could be true if you really take any of the guys out of the lineup, but it makes the other receivers worse when you take Kendrick Bourne off the field. Again, I don't think he needs 100% usage rate. I really don't. Like, I think
not that type of player.
They should all be, I don't know if this math works, but they should all be at about 70, 75%. Bourne should be there.
So I guess that's our spiel on that. I think, like you said, go into this week, figure out a role for himself. You'd hope Mac has some sort of leeway now and some power in that room to be like, hey, this is my guy. I like throwing to him. We gotta find a way to get him more involved, and they take that. But we're not going to know till Sunday. I think if you go into this game and you see him play, 10, 12 snaps, it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, free this guy. Like, if you're not going to play him, someone will. Like, someone would take Kendrick Bourne. We heard about the reports. They were getting calls all training camp before the Thornton injury. And then you have to wonder when he does come back, Thornton comes back, are they going to try to utilize him more? Does that push him down the depth chart? So put it this way, Kendrick Bourne should be getting the same snaps or the same amount of snaps Nelson Aguilar is. And that's no disrespect. Like you said, that dig he fumbles, that's Kendrick Bourne's bread and butter. That's his route. So you got to find a way to get him on the field more consistently because you have nobody on the field really that can make a play with the ball in their hands after the catch. So anything else on this game? I know we kind of all over the place. It's the first time we've talked, me and you, about it. So there certainly could be some things we missed, you missed, that you might want to bring up. But I'm cool burying the hatchet and looking forward to next week.
One other thing, I mentioned this on my podcast on 98.5 The Sports. This is a really random thing, but it's just something I noticed during the game. And, we're going to have to learn whether you like Matt Patricia as the play caller or not. I think I know how most people feel. He's going to be the play caller. And we have no idea what his offensive philosophy is. You can assume it's going to be kind of similar to Bill Belichick's, but
And they're not making a change midseason. Like, it's too late. So this is what you got.
it would have to get really ugly for them to do that. So what are his tendencies? What are his beliefs? Where does he differ from Belichick? Really small sample size. So I don't want to call this a trend yet because it's not. But there were two fourth downs, or two of the fourth downs they went for it. There was the one to Henry, which what are you doing? This is something else I want to talk about before I get into the dumb little trend thing. The 4th and 7, that's coming out of a timeout. They blew it. The 4th and whatever it was to Hunter Henry, 4th and 4 to Hunter Henry.
Yeah.
Coming out of a timeout. And that was a bad timeout. Before they took that timeout, they did not necessarily need points on that drive. They could have gone for that 4th down, not gotten it, and still potentially been in the game. It wouldn't have helped. But once they took that timeout, that play became must convert. You cannot, and this is, we've been saying this for years, for the last 2 years, that, this is so uncharacteristic of the Patriots, so they'll definitely fix it. It's characteristic now. That was poor situational football. You can't come out of the timeout and just have nothing like that.
And throw a heave in triple coverage.
On the defensive fourth down at the end of the half, they were base personnel against an obvious passing situation, one safety deep when they're probably going for the end zone. And then, you come out in some weird sort of hitch go, Hunter Henry in triple coverage. Miami backed off. They gave you the first down there. They were playing you like you should have played them at the end of the first half. So, that's poor situational football. You can't come out of timeouts poorly like that. You just can't do it. On the Henry play, and there's another 4th down I want to reference too. It was another 4th and short. It was a little earlier in the game.
It was a draw play to Montgomery, right?
Not that. No, not that. They ended up converting because of a penalty. Mack threw the ball down the field in the end zone to Parker. Right.
Yep.
Those 2 4th and shorts, they threw the ball deep. And they seemed like designed deep throws, not like Mack didn't have any underneath options.
I thought the one to Parker, that it was a free play because you saw the flag. So I'm seeing it. I'm like,
no, but it wasn't a free play at that.
It wasn't. No.
So is this like they got very conservative on 3rd down, right? The 3rd and 3 run up the middle. And I forget what they did before the Parker play, but it was something similar. They were very conservative on 3rd down and then like very aggressive on 4th down. It was almost like switched. The conventional thinking is if you know it's 4 down territory, you maybe take a shot on 3rd and short, right? Catch them sleeping. Is this Matt Patricia being like, well, I know what I'd be looking for as a defensive coordinator, so I'm going to do the opposite? Is this a philosophy of his that they're going to take these shots on 4th down? It's just going to be something interesting to watch for me. But the one other big take that we never got to is they got to be better out of the timeouts. They have to be better after the timeouts. And look, yes, the Dolphins had timeouts too. On those same plays, it is a coach coaching his first career game.
I believe the timeout, they came out of a timeout and hit Waddle right before the half. So you can that was one of the plays I'm referencing.
Oh,
okay. I thought you were saying specifically offense. You can defense.
No, both
that
sides
can't
of the ball.
Happen.
On both sides of the ball. They had situated, again, the play at the end of half to Waddle, and then the 4th down incompletion to Hunter Henry. We're both out of timeouts, and they looked lost on both of those plays. You can't have that.
Not sloppy. Like I said last week, don't get in a slop fest. This is what happens when every time you're down there. You predicted it to a T. You've seen it for 10 years now. They're in the game. They come out flat. They're down 7 or 10 at half. They make a couple stops on defense. They're 1 or 2 plays away from converting and getting back in the game, and they can't get that extra play. It happens every time down there. Obviously, when you score only 7 points, it's magnified more, and the loss stings a little bit. But there's no question, for as bad as they played on offense, they had chances to win that game. I'm sorry. If you don't think otherwise, you're crazy. They held them to 13 points. Their defense in the second half was awesome. They held them to 3 points? They got timely stops. They brought pressure. They were much better in coverage in the second half, and they just, like I said, one or two plays
And
away every single drive. It's mind boggling. It's frustrating as watching, covering the team as a fan, whoever you
yeah.
are. I know it's week one, but that can't happen. It's a divisional opponent. I know it's a new head coach. This is what happens every year.
And by the way, good point here in the comment. Whoever pointed this out, the Carl Davis offsides.
Yep, that killed
was
you.
also after a timeout.
Was it really?
Yeah, was also after. I think that was a Miami timeout. I believe it wasn't one of theirs.
It's still a timeout.
That was one of theirs. That was one of theirs. Yep, that's the state. You can't. And he was right on the ball. I mean, again, poor situational football. That's a good. Whoever that was, Chris pointed that out. Thank you for that. That was a good point.
So I think it's time to bury the hatchet for this game. Move on. It's weak. They started the same situation last year. I think there was a little more buzz to it because Mac looked good. It was his first game. It's completely different this year. I understand. But any last takeaways? Obviously, we'll kind of use these shows on Tuesday to break down the game from Sunday, give our thoughts, and then give a little sneak peek into Thursday's show, which will obviously preview. We're on to Pittsburgh. That's our motto now. But anything last takeaways before? I know Pittsburgh's without TJ Watt. Najee Harris is kind of questionable with a foot injury. So that's good for them. I thought they looked much better, especially on defense. You're probably going to see a lot of what you saw Sunday. So they got to get this thing figured out pretty quick.
Yeah. I mean, that could be an interesting game with all those injuries. I don't think Pittsburgh's very good. I was very impressed with what they were able to do to the Bengals. Just the Bengals kept throwing at Minkah Fitzpatrick.
I was going to say, he's a stud, man. Like,
I
single-handedly won them that game.
First thing you say in the meeting is, hey, let's throw at Minkah Fitzpatrick less than the last guys did.
That's a pretty good offense, pretty good coach, pretty good quarterback, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And he owned them.
How about don't bomb target Minkah Fitzpatrick and then build the rest of it from there. That's my early take on the Steelers. It's going to be interesting though, because he's not the Steelers defensive coordinator, but he has a big role in the Steelers defense.
Flores, yep.
Who worked for and took over for in New England, Matt Patricia.
Yes.
So Matt Patricia is calling plays against the guy who took over for him as the defensive coordinator.
And then won a Super Bowl here. And then went to Miami and owned you for 3 years. So
it's going to be very fascinating. At least I think it will be.
Yeah.
But we'll talk more about that on Thursday.
For sure. So we're on to Pittsburgh. I think there's a lot of negative, but I think there's still some positives you can take away from that game. I like to say Wednesday, you kind of just close the book and move on. I think that's a good point. Hopefully, I think the other thing too is, do these players seem engaged? You can have an argument either way. I guess that's just yet to be seen. That's something you'll have to monitor over the next few weeks and over the course of the season. But there's definitely a lot more question marks than answers for the Patriots right now, especially on offense. So here's them turning around. I think this is an interesting matchup, another measuring stick for them inside the AFC. I think Pittsburgh, like Miami, is another team that you'll be battling with down the stretch, kind of that fringe playoff team. These are ones you're going to want to have back. That one Sunday stings. That's a winnable game, I thought, for as bad as they played. So I'm Ryan Spagnoli. That is Alex Barth. We will see you all on Thursday to preview the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll get more in depth of that game, some key matchups similar to we did last Thursday.